Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today. Really important topic, common data security mistakes to avoid that will cripple your business. So the last couple years, there have been more fraud events in the payroll business than I think maybe the prior 10 or so combined. And I think the reasons are obvious, right? A paycheck is kind of the source of people's money, right? And so the movement of money from withdrawing funds from an employer's account to the payroll provider's account so that they can fund a direct deposit transaction. Then there's files going around the internet for those direct deposits. There's the checks themselves. There's the remittance of payments to the taxing jurisdictions. There's payments and money movement that happens to third-party vendors in states, for example, for garnishments like child support. The bottom line is payroll is an area that has lots of money movement, and it touches so many employees that it creates all these insertion points where the bad guys can make attempts to try to get in the last couple of years. There's been some doozies. We are not here to talk down on any of our competitors in the industry, but there has been some big impact where some companies have gone out of business. Customers of these companies have gone out of business because hackers, and I'd say the worst of all kinds is generally the ransomware attackers, really truly overnight bringing otherwise healthy companies to their knees. So really important topic. Look forward to taking you through it. In my guest today, I think is the perfect candidate to do so. So Josh Gohman, I can say a friend and a colleague. He's our director of information security at Asure, and really Josh is a specialist in cybersecurity very specifically. So Josh, welcome to today's conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
Okay, so let's maybe first talk about data security in like how big of a deal is this? I think so many people, especially small and mid-sized companies, think, okay, data breaches. This is the thing of big companies, and yeah, I need to be conscious about it. But this really isn't a big company versus small company thing. There's no such thing as too big or too small to get hacked here, is there?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think the real takeaway is no company is too small. Attackers are not manually looking for companies in a phone book or something, right? They're using automated tools. They're sending things out. They're looking for either whether it's vulnerable systems or sending phishing emails. They're doing it in an automated fashion where they can blast everybody. And so they're just carpet bombing essentially companies, and that's really why. And I think probably small companies are probably even more vulnerable often because they don't have the resources that a large company would have to prevent or to be prepared for an attack. It could catch them off guard per se, and I think that's why you see that statistic on the left. I think it's higher than most people think, but it's really the fact of the matter is that no company is too small.
Say more about the automation. I mean, forgive the bad pun, but the only thing when you're fishing, you got to go where the fish are. It doesn't do any good to have a great equipment, great pole, great rod, great bait if it's hanging off the side of the boat and there's no fish there. You gotta fish where the fish are. But fishing, again, forgive the pun, it's different. What are some of these automated, more sophisticated tools the bad guys are using these days?
The funny thing is, Mike, that the bad guys are using some of the same tools that we in the business world are using, from a sales and marketing perspective to send mass emails, whether marketing or sales, to our customers. They're using the same automated tools or very similar automated tools to blast emails, millions of emails out to just every different company. And you think if the pretty average or pretty good, I would say, fish rate is about 4%. I've worked with companies that have had fish rates, in the 30%. But even if a 4% fish rate you're talking about 40,000 people that have gotten phished. And if even 4% of that 40,000 actually get phished and say give data to the attacker, that's still 1,600 people. I mean, that's a lot of result out of what is essentially a very small effort.
Yeah, let's do this, Josh. So I'm going to assume most people on this call today know what phishing is, but the average entrepreneur works 60, 80 hours a week in their business. They're experts at their business in their industry, but not IT. Tell us more what phishing is. PH, not F. PHI phishing.
That's correct. Yeah. So phishing is it's basically using email maliciously. They're sending an email to a user with the intent of tricking them into giving to a system. So there might be a link in the email that you click that looks like your company's login page, and it's like, oh, you need to reset your password. So you put your password in, and what you're really doing is giving your password, your username and password to the attacker. But it also might have a malicious attachment where you either click a link and go to a website, or just the attachment is attached directly and it downloads and then installs some malware on your system, which is, again, a common way. Going back to ransomware, it's a very common way of how ransomware gets onto systems.
Yeah, very good. Now, so interesting. We're talking about the external threats, right? So this is the classic attacker in a dark hoodie. You can't see their face. They're somewhere else across the globe, bouncing from virtual server to virtual server, so you can't trace who they are. All this dark stuff, phishing. But that's not where most IT breaches happen, is it?
No, I mean, really, the vast majority of breaches within the IT system, so IT breaches, occur from, really this kind of phishing type attempt, right? So it's the attacker is tricking the user into doing something on their behalf, whether it's giving them their username and password to the system, or tricking them to install malware or some other type of Trojan. These are all just types of malware, essentially. So they're tricking the user to do it for them, right? Because it's vastly more difficult to hack into, like we see in the movies, into a system, and just much easier just to basically ask and have the user give it to you. I hate to say it, but that's really is the largest kind of attack vector that we're seeing.
So let's break down some of these numbers here. So 40% of data breaches caused by employees who exposed sensitive data to hackers. So this is the group where it is an external threat. It's an external hacker,
right.
Probably some type of a phishing, right? So so you do these penetration tests internally to us and all of Assure's employees all the time. But give me a use case, share for our audience a use case of what this, specifically what this might look like, how it is that they actually get sensitive data exposed.
Yeah, so it's going to be, it usually comes down to a sense of urgency. So you're creating a context for the user that the attacker could be impersonating a client, or could be impersonating an executive in the company, or some other person that's something, essentially creating the context of like urgency. And so you're trying to keep the user off guard, to kind of unhinge their normal decision-making process, where they would normally say, I don't normally send this report to the owner. Why would they want that? The context is that it's urgent. They've created a story that sounds reasonable, and then essentially the user wanting to be, to really to help out to the owner, or to service a client, they provide the data to the attacker, like unwittingly, essentially, because they're the attacker is impersonating somebody that the user already knows.
Yeah, so leveraging, name dropping, you get the unsolicited email, and it appears as though it's an email from, say, your boss's boss, right?
Yes.
And so what guidance would you give people on how to be on the lookout for some of these? Like, I mean, some of them, these aren't you just got this surprise email from some Nigerian prince who wants to send you $1 million, right?
Right.
Some of these are pretty
Yeah.
darn sophisticated. So how the heck
Yeah.
do you know that this is fake and not to act on it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it comes down to training, and awareness, ensuring that the user at the end of that email has been trained and is kind of on the lookout for some of these red flags that you might see in an email, in a phishing email, whether it's, so that's easy to just say, to make the display name on an email look like somebody else's name, say that the email comes from Gohman when it's really, acme1234@gmail.com is the actual email address. So looking for those types of things, looking for that mismatch between the display name and the email address that you would expect that user to send an email from, things like grammatical errors in the email, looking for other formatting issues, understanding that sense of urgency that they're trying to create. And so, like, I understand this email seems really urgent. Take that 1 extra second, or 10 extra seconds maybe, and really think through, is this really legitimate? Like, does this really make sense? Could I confirm, with this person outside of the email that this is a legitimate request? So it's really just kind of being prepared. And really that comes down to training and awareness.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, but the simplest way to do this, most people's guts are pretty good. It's
Yeah.
giving the training, not even, it's not so much how to spot the fakes, because I think people have a decent gut on that. It's what to do when you think you got it, right? It's like understanding the impact of clicking on something when you shouldn't have, right? So that you just get understand how critical this is to do right. But I've seen these where I get an unsolicited email. It's the name's right, spelled correctly. It's from my boss asking to do something, and it's grammatically correct. But I just know how my boss speaks. Of the thousands of emails I've gotten from my boss, just instantly little hair steps
Yeah.
on the back of my neck. I'm like, wait a second, that's not how they talk to me, right? That's not the vocabulary they would use. Truly can be as simple as a separate email or a one-to-one text
Yeah.
or a phone call. Pick up, hey John Doe, did you just send such and such to me? No? Okay, hit the spam button so everybody's alerted, right?
Right. And you bring up a great point, alerting other users. Security is a team sport, right? So when you see something, chances are, because the attackers are using automated tools and they're sending it to everybody, that other people in your company are getting it. And so if you're the first one to identify it, putting your hand up and saying, hey, everyone, be on a lookout. Like, you see this email, it's fake. That is a huge piece of it.
So let's break down the middle stat, 34%. So call it a third of cyber attacks were from company insiders. So I think a lot of people might find this one just shocking. And we'll talk, in the next topic here about, how, remediation you can do and processes you can do, including segmentation of systems and roles and responsibilities. But this is crazy. A third of all attacks come from an insider. Say more about that, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, it's when a user has too much access, and again, like you said, we'll talk about the remediation in a minute, but when a user has too much access, to do things that they don't need to do, it opens the door for them to be able to say, oh, I can edit this ACH file and send some dollars to my account, and nobody will notice, or to send some data outside of the company, or take some data home and then provide it to somebody. So kind of managing that and understanding that that while human capital, your employees are your biggest asset, but they do have a risk, and because in order to do our jobs, whatever your company is, people have to have access to the systems, and too much access can open that door for fraud. And so really, and this isn't about, it's not that I don't trust, Sally to do her job, or I don't trust Sally, because I think she might commit fraud. It's really kind of like keeping honest people honest, separating duties into segments so that one person does one thing, one person does another. And that also, speaking outside of the security world just for a minute, there's also a customer service aspect of that, especially in the payroll world, kind of as you alluded to in your opening, there's so many different pieces of the movement that legitimately an accidental mistake could be made, and having these separation of duties, having two people look at something could catch that as well. So it's not just security, but it certainly, I would say, is a big piece of
that. Yeah, and then it's so hard, right? Because you might have an employee who's been with you, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. It's like, especially small businesses, you become like family with each other in so many ways, right? It's like, how can I all of a sudden now implement this division of labor and division of roles and responsibilities? Because having one person who can set up new accounts, and I'm giving an accounts payable example, because I don't want to give any examples of how people attack payroll companies. But in accounts payable, if your finance person is the person that can set up new vendors, and they're also the person who's the check signer, and they're also the person who reconciles the bank account, they could be paying some little vendor that you have no idea is them for years, and you'd never know it, right? So
exactly right.
You need to have the same separation of duties here. And the thing to think about, and Josh, I want you to maybe comment. I don't know if you know a use case. This isn't just about your office manager who's worked for you for 20 years and you trust to the end of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You can't trust, even if you trust them and they've never done anything that you can detect, you can't trust how they personally might get compromised, right? Because a sophisticated hacker may not try coming through the back door, right? Meaning attacking you directly. They might try to come in through some back side door, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning they might attack your employee and then get in a very personal way and get leverage over that employee. And if that employee has anything in their personal life that could be leveraged, all of a sudden that hacker has an in to your company, right?
Yeah. No, that's right. That's exactly it. And that's where I go back to, there's always a risk associated with, people, just like there's risk associated with technology. And that's even if the person is the most trustworthy person you could ever have or know, there's always that element of, some element of their personal life where they could be vulnerable to extortion or bribery. And, then then essentially the company is compromised through that employee. And reducing the access to just what users need kind of reduces the risk essentially of compromise. It reduces the potential exposure that the attacker could gain, right? They could only get so far basically in the door, if you think of it that way. And that's really the key, because if a user who has access to everything, even if they don't use it, right? If they, going back to the phishing example of when, a user would input their username and password into a phishing email. Now the attacker has access to everything in the system. And it was all because that user had too much access.
Yeah, and so we're kind of beating up this point about people and tricking, but I think it's because the number on the right, right? So there are, there is such a thing as somebody, watching some spy show or whatever, and having this Mission Impossible scene in my head, somebody dangling from a ceiling while hacking in a keyboard in some computer. We're not saying that doesn't exist, but what we are saying is overwhelmingly most security breaches come from one human being being tricked, being fooled, being the dupe. And most of that comes from just they clicked on something they shouldn't have in an email, right?
Yeah.
Anything you'd want to say about this before we kind of move on to what I mostly want to share today, Josh, is what your recommendations are for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, when I see this, in the real world, pretty much every day, what I'm seeing is often it's employees. And I know we kind of finished this section talking about insider threats, but the vast majority of time I see, users clicking on a phishing email because they think they're doing the right thing. They want to help somebody. They want to service the client. They want to help the CEO. They want to, do the right thing, but the context of that situation has been, they've been put in that situation where they think they're doing the right thing. And then, they open the door then for a cyber attack. But yeah, I mean, I think, it all comes down, a big piece of this comes down to training your users to be prepared for, these types of very human cyber attacks. And we use the word cyber, and then people think computers, and that's all they get focused on, and they think the computers are going to protect them, but it's really not. It's really just security, and cyber is a component of that. Physical security is a component of that. Process security is a component of that. I mean, it's not just one facet. It's kind of you got to think of the whole thing.
Yeah, let's give these people something actionable here. So let's go right through the list. And when we've talked about this before, Josh, I always just think I feel like the area people miss the most is physical security. Just like we've talked about how this generally isn't some Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise dangling from the ceiling, hacking some mainframe. This really is people being tricked by clicking on things they shouldn't in email. But it just as easy. It's like I remember a day growing up in sales where you walked into an office and there was somebody working a reception desk, right? And those same offices exist, but nobody's at the reception desk. And just the simple ability to walk in and look at mail, right? And look at what the postman dropped off on the front desk or packages, let alone shadow somebody walking through a front door. And the amount of personal information that sits on people's desks and trash cans would make your hair stand up as a security professional. So maybe I gave away too much punchline there, but talk physical security with us before we start talking into the bits and bytes.
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of it, but I still think there's a little bit more here. I mean, I think physical security it's really that foundation, of a good security program. So you start there and we build up, right? Again, I think you kind of mentioned it. People overlook physical security because they just think, I lock my door, and I've got everything covered. Like nobody's going to come in and do something. But, within our industry, there is so much personal information that we handle every day. And I hate to say it, it does often get left out on desks. And as you mentioned, streamlining operations that don't always have that, receptionist kind of gatekeeper, keeping people in and out of the office. So this physical security is, keeping your desk clean, right? Making sure that when you get up and walk away from your desk to go to the break room or to go to the bathroom, or certainly when you leave for the day, that you're not leaving sensitive information out on your desk. One of the biggest things that people forget is that, unless you own your own building and you're the only person that has access to that building, there are other people that have access to your workspace, whether it's building maintenance, whether it's your cleaning crew that come in after hours. Those people have access, and if you're leaving data, information sitting out on a desk, even if it's in a conference room or something else, it has the potential for exposure. There's would be nothing to pick that stuff up and act like they're cleaning, and then just walk out with a stack of papers that have bank account numbers and social security numbers all over it.
And I think the main point, something I'd want to add on that one, if I could, Josh. So think about how most hacks happen. It's email, right? Yeah. So it's not like we're saying, hey, don't leave your password written on a Post-it note on your monitor because other people might see it. Yeah. But we're going to trust that that's an obvious one. You shouldn't. But if you have some documents sitting on your desk, and a person posing as a cleaning crew comes in and sees these documents, how much more effective would that hacker be sending you an email the next day referencing those specific documents, right? The likelihood of you clicking on that, because the email was so contextualized about a specific project you're working on, they might even know the name of the file, say, hey, here's the updated version of that Acme file, right? The likelihood that they can trick you it grows exponentially. So anything else on physical security before we move on to awareness and training?
Yeah. I'd say the last thing that we could talk about there is just like we talked about on the last slide, where we talk about, separation of duties, kind of breaking things up. Physical security, it's the same thing. You have a sensitive area, whether it's a pack out or distribute, if you're a payroll company, or it's an IT closet or some other sensitive area within your building, controlling who has access. If you don't need access, you shouldn't have it. So making sure that even if you give someone access temporarily, like I need to cover for you, Mike, while you're on PTO, when you come back, I don't need to cover for you anymore. I shouldn't have access to that area anymore. It's the small stuff that really adds up here.
Very good. All right, let's talk training. I think maybe this, knowing we've been talking email security, training is probably the highest impact thing an organization could do.
Yeah, no, I think it's the biggest, certainly dollar for dollar, it's the biggest payoff that you can invest from a security investment standpoint. For a few dollars a year per employee, you really can significantly reduce the rate of phishing from, as I've seen, 30% in some cases, down to 4 or even less percent, to really reduce that risk. But it's also not just phishing. It's not just email security. Security awareness training would cover kind of the gambit of that. Changing legislation within the HR and payroll world, privacy legislation, these physical security topics that we're talking about, that would all be covered in the security awareness training packages. And again, I'm not presuming that the small business owner that's working 80 hours a week is going to develop this training themselves. There's plenty of vendors out there that offer this training for pennies, really, if you think about it. And it's the biggest payoff, not the $20,000 firewall or security appliance that you buy. It's really this investing in really what is your human firewall, and that's your employees.
Very good. Okay, so you talk about the phishing rates of success. In the high end, it's 30%. On the low end, it's low single digits. Yep. But that's still something, right? So let's start talking a little technology, right? So what technology can you put in place for that 1, 2, 3, 4% that still do get tricked, that you're not left hanging?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a good security tool, and some of them are built in. If you're using Office 365 or one of these other cloud providers that are providing email, they have these tools built in. It's using them, getting them configured correctly, make sure that you're you're marking suspicious emails and providing a banner to an employee saying, hey, this email is coming from someone, it's not usually sent from this email. Like, this person doesn't normally send from this email. Or, hey, this email is coming from an outside sender. Please double check that that this is who you think it is. These little things, and those are applied by those security tools, those email tools. Also, the attachments that we talked about, malicious attachments, are certainly a problem. Stripping out some known attachments that are known to be potentially malicious, even if it just quarantines them and somebody then reviews it and looks at it. Also, these tools can provide a level of like link protection. So when you click on that link, it gives you a landing page to say, hey, is this really where you think you're going? Like double check to really kind of prompt that user, maybe jar that nugget of information that they learned in that training to say, oh, this isn't what I wanted to do. I wasn't intending to go here. This doesn't look right. I'm going to back up and not go forward to that link. So there's a lot of value in these tools. And again, I think people are probably surprised to find that they're already paying for them and don't even realize it.
Yeah, very good. Now what's the difference between phishing and antivirus then?
Yeah, so antivirus is an application that we install on our local machine, or IT installs on your local machine, that really is, again, an additional layer of defense. So, we're starting at training to try to prevent a user from clicking on the email. Then we're moving through to the email security tool that's providing that additional layer of like checks or security before the email gets to the user. And then finally, antivirus is really that endpoint protection tool that if all of those elements fail and that user does click on that link that has a download or a malicious attachment in the email, that antivirus software is going to detect and prevent that that malware from running on a local machine. Now, security is really defense in depth here, right? We're saying it's kind of starting at the top of training and we're working our way through to try to prevent something from happening. Our antivirus software, are they 100%? No, not always. That's why these ransomware attacks happen. But it's certainly, infinitely better than not having antivirus at all. All right, so it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Again, not a break the bank kind of thing, but definitely worthwhile.
So Josh, am I thinking about this the right way between those two bullets together, email security tools and antivirus? An email security tool might be something that warns me, hey, this isn't really the URL you think you're clicking on, or hey, are you sure you want to download this? It's tools that help you from ever engaging that bad software, that malware, that antivirus software in the first place. Antivirus software is kind of the next level. It's okay, you made the mistake. You clicked on the thing you shouldn't have clicked on, but now the software is going to try to kill it. Is that a way to think about it?
Yep, that's probably the best analogy you could make. That is exactly what.
Okay, so now that you get the next level down, disabling RDPs and macros. What the hell is an RDP?
Yeah.
and why should we disable them? And then, and then some people know what macros are, some people might not.
Yeah. So, RDP is remote desktop protocol. It's a remote protocol built into Windows that allows you to remotely access a computer. And I would probably really even expand that to just like all remote access protocols. There are others, but really disabling all of the different potential entry points that could allow an attacker to gain like direct access into your systems. We talk about the email and the phishing on the front end, but obviously we got to do the small stuff too, right? We got to make sure that we're not accidentally leaving the back door open to our network and allowing an attacker to come in. Macros, probably most folks are familiar with these macros, kind of add-ins to like Office products that allow advanced functionality. That same level of that same type of technology that allows that program to run inside of your Office product malware can be written in that language. And one of the things that's problematic with that is that, going back to antivirus, is antivirus sees that Word is running. It doesn't see the program that's running inside of Word. And so you can get that where it's not until the malware kind of branches out does the antivirus potentially see it, and then it's on the back foot basically. And so macros is one of those things where by default it should be disabled, maybe prompting the user to allow them to enable it. In fact, we'll talk about this in a minute, but newer versions of Office do that automatically. It realizes that that's a common attack vector, and then it disables it by default. But if you're using an older version, that's why I bring it up, and I've seen that. That's not necessarily disabled by default. That's something you'd have to manually do. So it's that all of these things right here are really about reducing your attack surface, reducing that. If you do click on that link, that malware, and it downloads, it has to be able to exploit something on your system. And if that something isn't there, then it doesn't work. And so these are just ways of kind of hardening your systems.
Yeah, very good. And talk more about segmenting of systems. And to me, we talked about it at the top here with physical security, that it's segmenting actual systems and how how connected they are digitally, but also users of those systems, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's definitely breaking it down even to the user to create that separation of duty, to create segments of users that can do certain tasks within the system. But it's also at the networking level, at the system, separating them out. One of the things that we've seen in some of the other, this is a tool that just to exploit. So we've seen this in some of these recent attacks, that making the network essentially like flat, so all systems can see each other. That just opens the door and allows malware to spread very quickly, because basically it can touch every system on the network from just a single system that it compromises. But by breaking down systems into segments, it prevents that spread of malware and reduces that blast radius to just, hopefully the goal would be just to the single system that was compromised. But certainly preventing, if you do have servers where you maybe have a file share in an IT closet, certainly making sure that those systems are segmented off of the same network that that your other systems are on. Again, I know this is maybe a little bit much for the average business owner, but if you do have an IT, if you outsource some IT resources, this is something that you could talk to them about, and then help kind of steer them in the right direction to get them configuring these systems correctly.
Josh, and maybe this is too much of a tangent, but just think about different systems. If you don't have in-house IT staff, then you definitely should get outside help, right? But what about just simple things like a guest Wi-Fi, right? So I'm a retailer, and I have my point of sale system on my network. I've only got one network, and my point of sale system is hooked up to the internet, right? And that's the same internet. That's the exact same exact same router that I Wi-Fi router that my computer at the front desk running my point of sale connects to, that my guests and customers are in accessing the free Wi-Fi that I think that I'm giving them. Just speak to what kind of vulnerabilities can exist in just that simple scenario.
Yeah, so people often talk about like guest Wi-Fi, right? So public Wi-Fi, you're connecting to an insecure network, and then that somehow makes you more vulnerable than if the network was secure. Well, I'll tell you is that once you can get onto a network, once you're letting your customers onto your network, they can see any system on that network. If it's not segmented, they can see all of the systems on the network. And so through some very non-invasive means, they can scan and identify every system on the network, and they could find that point of sale system. They could find that file server that you have. You think it's locked in the back closet, but really it's on the internet, so it's on the network. And so if someone can scan it and see it, they can attack it. And so the funny thing is, this is not a complicated thing. Often many new routers box that you can add a guest Wi-Fi. And so that's a one very simple way that you can add this kind of segmentation to your network.
Yeah, very good. And then when you say update, just tell everybody what you mean by that.
Yeah, and we put this one last because I'll tell you it's definitely the most important. So what I mean by update is that's keep your systems and applications updated, right? It's too easy to kind of fall into the it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Why do I need to think about updating my Windows machine? Why do I need to think about updating Office? Why do I need to think about updating, Adobe or Flash or any other application on my machine? Because, when I click on it, it works. Yeah, well, the problem is that those updates are fixing security holes that somebody has found. And in many cases, somebody has written some malware to attack it. And like I went back to the antivirus or disabling some of those features on Windows. If the malware runs on the machine and what it's looking for, what it's trying to exploit isn't there, then it doesn't work. So if you've applied the patch or the update to your Windows OS or Apple OS or Office, Adobe, anything, right? If you fixed the hole, then that malware can't run and compromise that issue. And it then essentially just doesn't do anything. It runs, but then it doesn't work. And so, and this is going back to kind of, I think I said this earlier, is the small stuff matters. Updates are one of those easy things. You don't need a complicated IT department to check the box for auto updates. Windows will update for you. Chrome or Firefox, Edge, they all update automatically. Some of the other applications you may not quite update so easily, but making sure that you are running the most recent version, the most current version of software, and that's not just Windows, it is all of the applications, because chances are if it's written in some sort of softwaring language, it can have a vulnerability. And so really it's the simplest thing, but it really is the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, and I just keep coming back to sort of dumb it down, but update your physical security. You turn an employee over. If you don't get the key back, I mean, change the locks. It's a lot less expensive than getting a data breach, right? And update your security training so that you're always using new, more modern examples of phishing tests to try to test your employees and see if you can trip them up. So update all aspects, not just the software that we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey Josh, if you could, so my hope for anybody listening today is that this is valuable information. If they never do business with Asure, that they can take this and they can run a more secure business, and that's my sincere hope for everybody. I would want to just take call it 30 seconds. I'll give you an opportunity to just talk about what security we provide at Asure in how you lead that function. Can you kind of take us through? What does it mean to be SOC certified? What's the value of having our systems hosted in AWS? What is Nacha, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think, one of the benefits of a company with a little bit more scale is being able to kind of take and repeat all of these things that a smaller company might not be able to implement because it's. And so we've really, implemented, a holistic security program. We've deployed our systems within AWS. We've built our environments within AWS, all with security in mind. I think, you mentioned about AWS. What does it mean to host, in AWS? And AWS has a global network of data centers that, if we were to host it ourselves, which we could, and that data center got struck by lightning or earthquake or whatever, how would we recover from that? How would we continue to provide our services? By partnering with AWS and being able to leverage their global infrastructure and host our systems in multiple data centers with completely redundant internet, power, infrastructure, all of it, we're able to kind of spread our systems out. We're able to recover from, I wouldn't want to call it a disaster, but certainly recover from incidences much faster. And then SOC is really taking that program that we've created and having an independent third party come in and evaluate our program. And it's one thing for me to stand here and tell you that we have this wonderful program with all these plans and policies and how we've hosted our systems in AWS, but to have a third party auditor who has to adhere to standards created by the AICPA, right? This is the CPA industry that have a long history of auditing and them validate in the form of a report that we can provide to our customers that lists out everything that we're doing and confirmed that we're doing. That provides a lot of assurance that, one, we have to be honest, because that the auditors are going to tell, they're going to see everything, and they're attest not just that our program is operating correctly, but they're also attesting to the fact that was set up correctly. So there's no holes in the program, and then it's operating that way as well. And then expanding kind of on that same theme to NACHA, right? So this is the global National Automated Clearinghouse Association, where all of our transactions are flowing through, and NACHA also audits us. They have a set of standards of how we manage our ACH transactions, all the different transactions that come out of the payroll system, but also data security. How are we protecting that data and making sure that it's secure and that it's available and that it can be used? And so that's, again, it's another kind of third party that comes in and audits us.
Very good. And I can talk a little bit about NPRC, which isn't necessarily a security specific organization, the National Payroll Reporting Consortium, but we are an active member of the NPRC, just like every big name payroll company you could possibly think of. And what the NPRC does is really advocates on behalf of our industry. So if certainly we saw a lot of this during, say, the pandemic, where there's major legislation that impacted, say, tax reporting in 941s. Well, how you report on a quarterly employer's tax return that gets filed electronically, there's security implications, right? How are we going to actually track things in a way and report on things in payroll that are that set vendors and customers up for success where that data can't be compromised? So what I'd say the value there is we just simply have a seat at the table. So Josh, all really, really great stuff. Maybe just last thing in closing, how do you see this world of security evolving? We know that in the last couple of years, at the top of this conversation, there's been more data breaches and ransomware hacks in the payroll business in this last 2 and 3 years than there has been probably the decade prior combined. So where do you see the trends? Where do you think this is going as for people specifically in this industry?
Yeah, so I would say that we're seeing the trend that payroll companies are increasingly being classified as money movers. So they're being classified by state state auditors, state agencies as essentially as banks, and with that comes additional scrutiny. And that's for better or for worse. But I think that people are increasingly seeing the payroll industry as another piece of critical infrastructure, just like water, whether it's a pipeline moving, petroleum. They're all pieces of critical infrastructure that if they go down, they could take away large swaths of our economy. Payroll is a piece of critical infrastructure. I think as these agencies are continuing to kind of tighten the screws on how we're regulated, that you'll see more and more requirements for payroll companies to adhere to the same standards that big banks, big financial institutions are adhering to.
I think that's good advice. We certainly see it in our dealings working with states and these states and these auditors. The intensity definitely is ratcheting up. So, Josh, I always enjoy talking to you. Get smarter on security every time I do. And just want to thank everybody else for joining us today. So, Asure is in the business of providing payroll and HR software and HR services for more than 80,000 growing companies. So whether you need payroll, HR, time and attendance software, or you need the professional expertise of SHRM certified HR experts that you can hire on a fractional basis, so really just a fraction of the cost of hiring your own staff, this is exactly how we help companies grow, because by doing so, we offer the expertise, the accuracy, and certainly the security to let you focus your time, your energy, and your cash on growing your core business. So, Josh, thanks again for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to everyone else. Until next time.